right, hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 for the limited set review for Tarkir Dragonstorm. If for some reason you didn't watch part 1 where we talk about the signpost uncommons and the white cards, you'll see we have a guest. There's two of us here doing this. This is my friend Ryan. Would you like to introduce yourself again to the class?
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm one of Nicole's Sanctum teammates. I'm also a limited junkie and a content creator. I do content on Patreon. I've done these set reviews with my roommate Maura before, and doing this one with Nicole. Yeah, it's will be and has been fun.
So these are nice and long, and so we're going to go ahead and just get started. We're going to look today at the commons and uncommons for blue, and then we'll also put black in this video if it's works out time-wise, so we'll see. All right, this is Humbling Elder. It's 1 blue for a creature, human monk, 1/2, that has flash. When this creature enters, target creature and opponent controls gets -2/-0.
This is going to humble a lot of people in the first week of the format when they forget to play around it.
Yes. So there's
Um,
a lot of things I like
yeah,
about this card. It reminds me very, very lightly of Howler's Heavy, which, if anyone has watched any of my drafts, they know that I love Howler's Heavy. I really am decently high on that card. This card's really cool. It slots into a lot of different decks in a lot of different ways. So it is a creature, a 1/2 for 1 mana, which is, fine rate in terms of power toughness. It has flash, so the -2/-0 can be used in a lot of ways in terms of like a combat trick, to make combat go a little bit better, not trade creatures as often, whatever it is. But it also has this really cool part of being able to be like a flash way to trigger the second spell cast of the like blue-red cast 2 spells per turn mechanic. So we haven't gotten to see a lot of these cards that have, this card gets this if you've cast 2 spells this turn. But this is a pretty cool way of enabling that. And so, how good those cards end up being, I think, is a big part of how highly you take this card, but I think it's really cool.
yeah, I agree. I think this is mainly a flurry card, like a cast 2 spells card. And I would say it's more of a combat trick than a creature. Like, I'm not that happy about a 1 mana 1/2 flash, but it's a pretty decent combat trick, on a body that like is gonna be something. It's a real body on the board. So I'm not super high on this card, but I would land probably somewhere around like a 7 for it. It feels like kind of an average common. You're gonna want it more in the flurry decks, the Jeskai space, that kind of thing.
I actually think synergistically it's going to be valued a little bit higher than the other like commons. It just seems like it fits into like slots pretty decently into a lot of decks. I think it's probably going to be closer to like a 6.5. I'm not strong enough on this to say I wanted it at a 6, but I we've talked a lot about flexibility, and I think this is one of those cards that has a lot of options in terms of deck building.
Does feel like a Nicole card. Next, we've got Wingspan Stride. Single blue for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. And for 2 and a blue, you can return this aura to its owner's hand. So I guess I was initially reading this as if you could return it from your graveyard to your hand, but that's not right, is it? It's only returning from the battlefield.
Yeah, this is like
That
if something gets
makes me a
blocked
lot
and you have
lower
3
on this
mana, you can
card.
keep it. I think this card's going to
Yeah,
be close to unplayable.
I
Um
agree. Like you really the bounce thing can enable your flurry. Yeah, that's the joke. That's the thing it's doing. But like spending 3 mana on that is so much to spend. Like you're gonna have better ways to spend your mana in most limited decks. You really want single mana enchantment +1/+1 and flying if you're playing this card. And I don't think we want that very often in limited. It's fine rate, but you're just down a card when you use it. So you got to be really aggressive. I can't see this being good.
Yeah, I am saving my 10s for like absolutely limited unplayable, but this one's probably like a 9.5.
Closest we've gotten. Yeah.
Yeah,
9, 10, somewhere in there, I think is
not
right.
excited
Yeah,
about it.
I agree.
All right, this is Unending Whisper. This is 1 blue for a sorcery. Draw a card. It also has Harmonize, so for 5 and a blue, you can cast it for its graveyard from its Harmonize cost. I'll read Harmonize one more time for the sake of this being a different video, but it says you may cast this card from your graveyard for its Harmonized cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power, and then you exile it. So sometimes you can cast it from your graveyard for You know, a reasonable cost. This is definitely for the two spell decks. You know, you're never that excited to put one blue, draw a card into your deck. But you know, it's kind of cool that you can exile it to draw a card again later. But I really think if you have things that reference wanting two spells and that's something you care about, then you're gonna want to play this card as like kind of a filler type card, but it's never gonna be something you prioritize super high.
I agree. Yeah, like tapping a creature for harmonize is a real cost, and 6 mana is a lot, so you really need to tap a creature to have this be any kind of reasonable amount of mana on the harmonize, the flashback. Uh, I'm not excited about this card. It does some synergistic things, like it's good at double spelling. Yeah, we kind of get that. It like crosses over in that synergy space. It removes a card from your yard to trigger those things. Okay. Um, but like I'm kind of putting air into my deck when I'm putting this in my deck, and I normally don't want that. So I'm pretty low on it. I'd probably put it at like an 8, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It's playable, but nothing gonna be too exciting. All
Next
right.
up, we have Ringing Strike Mastery. Single blue for an enchantment. When it enters, tap the enchanted creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap steps. This is just a 1 mana claustrophobia, but the enchanted creature also has 5 untap this creature. So interesting. We saw Singing Bell Strike, I think, in original cons, which was 1 in a blue, but then the creature had 6 and untap it for the same effect. And I think this is maybe slightly better. It's not full removal, but it's closer to removal than to like tap and stun something. And 1 mana is really cheap. It obviously is good with double spelling. I think this card's going to be fine, but I don't think it's going to be premium by any means. It'll definitely be better in more aggressive decks, I think. Although, controlling decks might use this as kind of a speed bump, cheap, keep the pressure off of you card, so it's not unplayable there certainly. But I think this card is good when you want to generate tempo and sort of run your opponent over by like casting double spells
Yeah,
in like a big flurry.
especially in limited nowadays, there's so much to do with your mana all the time. So like, you know, it is a cost to have 5 on tap, but it's you don't really want your removal spell to be able to just like
Right,
untap.
they can kind of counter it once they get to a certain amount of mana. Yeah, and notably, like I think what mostly your opponents are going to want to do with this is pay 5 once and then just block with the creature,
Yeah.
so that they don't have to keep paying the 5 and they'll get their card out of it. Like that does matter, you're removing most of the creature, but they can basically pay 5 later in the game to get like a really nice blocker most of the time. And so, yeah, I'm not super excited about this card. I'd give it probably like a 6.
Yeah,
It's
6
going
is
to be
about where
playable.
I'm
You're going to
at.
play it a lot, but
It doesn't get
yeah,
rid of effects, which is something that's super notable. It doesn't make it like, you know, a better removal spell. I think I'm gonna be pretty happy to have like one of these in my sideboard against like the mobilized decks and things, where this really like will set the aggressive decks behind. But it's not anything I'm gonna be prioritizing, I don't think. Okay, we have Agent of Codis, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 creature. It has got renew, so this is the mechanic we were talking about earlier. Exile this card from your graveyard for 3 and a blue. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So you know, I've mentioned now a couple times that in limited nowadays you always have a lot to do with your mana. Um, a 2/1 body I think is pretty underwhelming, especially in limited nowadays, and with all of these decks that are making, you know, like 1/1s, like this can't even really block a mobilized token without trading off. And then 4 mana to put counters is I think decently expensive. Like you can do, you know, we were talking about how like our 4 mana cards that make 2/2/2s are like, you know, fine right nowadays. And so 2 counters, like even though you don't need an additional card to do it, I think I'm generally gonna be pretty excited to play this card. You know, maybe I'll play a copy if like I have a Kishla skimmer or something where I really want to like trigger leaving the graveyard effects. But I think I'm probably generally underwhelmed.
I agree. I think this card's pretty underwhelming. Like the body is just not what you need on a 2 drop. Um, it's never horrible. Like, it is a creature you can play on 2 and block with sometimes and attack with sometimes and gets a little bit of value later, but I agree. Like, I don't think this is going to be a card that you're excited about putting in your deck almost ever. So, yeah, I'd say like an 8 probably for
Yep,
me.
I agree. 8.
Cool. Next, Teamer Devotee. One in a blue for a 3/3 with Defender, and this is the part of the Devotee cycle for blue for Teamer. It has one and Teamer filtering, so it'll add blue, green, or red for you, fix you for those colors. I like the 2 mana 3/3 Defender body on this. Like, this is exactly the kind of card you want in your control deck. It will block, it will stabilize you, and it will fix your mana. Like, this is great. Not anything special, not anything that's like actively helping you win the game, but I like this card a lot. I think this is going to be one of Blue's better commons, probably.
Yeah, in a lot of the recent sets, they've put in these like 2 mana 3/3 defenders that have sort of like a effect that turns them into a non-defender creature. All of them have been very good. Stalked Researcher I thought was pretty good. Midnight Mangler was really like a pretty impressive card, I think, in the draft typically. And this one, while it doesn't have a way to like become aggressive, it does seem like blue is a color that spends a lot of mana, wants to play long games, and so a 3/3 defender seems super useful. And that body being on your filter seems great. I think this card's probably pretty good. I think I probably put it a little higher than the other filter one we've seen so far. The one that's in white, but that also might be color preference. Uh, like just a
No, I
slight
think
step
I
above. If we
agree.
held the
Like
other
the
one a five,
card,
I probably
the
put this one at
vanilla
like
test on it, I think
4.5.
is a little better. Yeah, I agree. I do want to note, like, you should not be playing this in your deck unless you're using the fixing most of the time. Sometimes you'll really need the defensive speed, but like because this can't ever attack, it's almost always going to be a pretty bad as a creature. So you do really need to be like using the fixing. It's just I know every deck you play, Nicole will definitely use the fixing, and most decks I play will. And like, yeah, I think
In this
you can get a
format,
lot out
it's
of it.
definitely more valuable than it is in some others.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a card that gets a pretty high rating in this set, but like if we were talking about any other set, Jason and I would be really excited about it.
Yep.
All right.
Next, we have Dispelling Exhale. One in a blue for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you may behold a dragon, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and if a dragon was beheld, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead. So it's, the basic, like, what is it called? Quench effect that we get a lot in Limited these days. It's counter unless they pay 4 if you have a dragon, which is essentially a 2 mana counter spell in Limited almost all of the time. Um, yeah, these effects kind of range in how good they are between limited formats. I'm not sure how to evaluate this one.
Yeah, I think the more that we've looked at the set, granted we haven't looked at rares yet, and I'm sure there's a lot of dragons in the dragon set and at rare. But we've seen like one omen in dragon in each individual color pair, and then we'll see how many there are in multicolors. But looking at the signpost uncommons, I don't think we actually looked. I don't think any of them were dragons. So I
I think
think,
I agree. Yeah,
in limited, my general impression is that you should be treating this as a card where you're not beholding a dragon, and that's just like similar to the other behold card we talked about. It's just like something that occasionally happens, and if you do, then the card is like a little bit better. I'd say these counterspell effects, like we said, they range format to format between like a 6 and a 7. You never take them like super highly, but there are some sets where they're like a little bit more premier than other sets. With this set having a lot of what I'm assuming because of the name of the set, like bigger dragons, I imagine it'll be a little bit better in this set than like the average limited set. And so I'm anticipating this to be around a 6.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I'm good going with the 6. I tend to like this kind of effect. It's really good just to have something to do on turn 2 in your more controlling deck, and it will usually be relevant later in the game. You'll be able to get a card out of it, so I'm happy with the 6.
Great. All right. High Spire Bellringer. This is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 with flying. And it says the second spell you cast at each turn costs 1 less. I think it's fine. 1/4 is
Fine.
fine blocking body, I guess. It flies, but most of the time with flying, you want your creature to have slightly more power rather than slightly more toughness. Just because they've got that evasion to get a little bit of extra attacking in. Um, a card that I'm probably going to be fine to have if my deck really cares about the second spell thing. The thing is, I just don't think any deck where it requires you to play 2 spells in a turn, I don't think they're going to come together very often. This feels like, if you're the one drafter at the table that's playing this archetype, maybe it's pretty good, but Other than that, I think it's gonna be pretty underwhelming. I think I'd probably put this card at like an 8.
I agree. I'm even maybe at like a 9 with this card. I would call it like fine derogatory, where 3 mana 1/4 flyer is never going to be horrible, but it's also just like never going to be something that you really want and isn't going to be like actively making your game stronger. And I'm very unexcited about playing this card for its ability, where like it might save you a mana every now and then, but most of the time, like I want my cards that do well with double spelling to do well with double spelling on their own, and this doesn't really do that. Like, okay, it lets you cast 2 spells in a turn, but then you need another card that sort of pays you off for doing that. Yeah, I'm pretty low on this card, I would say.
Yeah, if you look
For
at
anyone oh, yeah.
we've talked about like precedent a fair bit, or I've talked about precedent a fair bit. If you compare this to like cards from any other set that have cost reduction effects, typically they're for like a specific card type or something. The one you could think about from like last set is Quick Welder, which is the 2/4 that makes artifacts cost less. And if you thought about it, like you only wanted to play that card if you had X amount of artifacts, like it really needed to impact the speed of the deck. And this one, it doesn't impact your first spell ever. And so I think it's just not going to be impactful enough.
I agree. Fun fact, this is essentially the same effect as one of the cards in my battle box, which is an uncard called Cheap Ass, which makes your spells cost half a mana less to play. This is essentially the same thing as that. Your second spell is going to cost one less, but yeah, that ability I don't think is very strong,
All right, we
and the body
understand.
is not
I
impressive.
Spire Bellringer's a cheap ass. You'll never forget it.
Next up, we have Sibsig Appraiser, 2 and a blue for a 2/1. Not an impressive body, but check out the ability. When this creature enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Organ Hoarder is back, baby! Let's go.
They took away the
Um,
name. They knew I lost too many organs.
um, this card's great. Really, really strong. Like 3 mana for a body and a card with selection. That's incredible. I really like this card.
Especially when there's
Seagate
things that are
Oracle was a
relevant
one
to
three.
having things in your graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is, a Sultai card clearly, like with the flavor, and it plays really well in the Sultai space in this set. Plays well with Teamer and Harmonize. Card's great. Um, I guess it also plays well with Jeskai with double spelling. Like you can certainly use this to find your second spell on like a late game turn. Uh, I'm probably giving this like a 4, maybe. I don't think it's actively making your deck incredible, but I could even see it going up to a 3. Like this is just a really pushed card.
Yeah, I agree that it's pushed. I think I'm probably closer to a 5, only because like they have nowadays like really pushed value on spells. Like there's a lot of cards that I think give you a lot of value, and at 3 mana, against like a lot of aggressive decks, you know, a lot of the time, like this being a 2/2 body would have been a huge difference than a 2/1, for example, with like mobilize and stuff. As great as this card is value wise and as it is at setting it up, I think you know, especially in value decks, you want your first couple of turns to kind of stabilize you. Make sure that you're okay against the aggro deck to just get value for the rest of the game. And this one is, I think, just like a step behind me wanting to take it as highly as like a 3 or a 4. But it's still obviously a great card, and I'm happy to take it. All right, I like the art on this card. Snow Melt Stag. This is 3 and a blue for a 2/5 creature with vigilance. During your turn, this creature has base power and toughness 5/2. And then for 7 mana, it can't be blocked this turn. That was a wild ride reading this card.
That's a
Um,
weird one.
yeah, this card's super weird. I think it's probably gonna be generally worth very little. Like I don't think we're gonna rate this card very highly. Um, the most comparable card in the last set is Gear Seeker Serpent, which was, cost reduced sometimes. But it was a good effect for it to not be able to be blocked in that format specifically because the format went to board stalls so often. And so, it is pretty format dependent how good this card is. At a 2/5 with Vigilance, it is a pretty good blocker on your opponent's turn. Um, and then, I don't imagine prior to making it unblockable, it's going to be able to attack a whole lot at a 5/2. You know, it might make your opponent keep a creature back to block it or something, but I don't anticipate it being super impactful. I think I wouldn't go as far as calling it a 9. It's probably a fine filler card. Like an 8.5 is my guess.
Yeah, I'm comfortable giving this like an 8. Like sometimes it'll be a good blocker in your controlling decks. It does weirdly pressure them into leaving back blockers, which can be a form of defense, I guess, sometimes. Best defense is a 5-2 on offense. And then it will like close out a game if you both are board stalled and you have a lot of mana and like can close out, them from 10 over a couple turns. But nothing special. 8, 9, somewhere in there. You
I
don't need
agree.
to prioritize this card. Next, we have Riverwalk Technique, 3 in a blue for an instant. This is one of those blue removal spells they print at common in most sets, so choose one. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. That's like the typical effect we see. And then the little bonus you get for this specific card this set is you can also choose to counter target non-creature spell instead if you want. Um, Interesting card. This removal spell is usually pretty good, I would say, in blue. Uh, it can be easy to think of it as bounce, but it's really more like removal. You are taking away their draw step, so it's a 1-for-1 in terms of cards, and it's getting rid of a creature on board at instant speed, so it's basically a removal style effect. And then this card can counter a really important removal spell or a big like there's Jeskai Revelation. There's like these big clan flavored rare spells that are super good. This can nab those. I think this card's going to be pretty good. I don't think you'll need to like pick it super highly, maybe, but you'll put it in most of your blue decks, I would say, and you'll want like one, maybe two. I like probably a 7 for this. Feels like a pretty average common, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. You know, like Ryan said, they print one of these effects in most sets nowadays, and they really range in how good they are. Like I think I remember talking to Jason, we were like pretty high on the one that was in Duskmourn. We liked the one from Duskmourn, but the one that was in Aether Drift, I think like I'm now at the point where I'm almost upset if I play it. And so it really
I
ranges.
agree.
This one does have a pretty notable second effect stapled onto it. You know, counter target non-creature spell. While it doesn't come up often, when it does come up, it probably like is changing the outcome of the game. And so having one of these as something to like, you know, kind of hold in your back pocket doesn't seem so bad. These always really depend on how the format plays out. You know, they range from I think like a 5 in the best of sets to like a 9 in the worst of sets. So I'm gonna go ahead and say 7. You know, it might end up being closer to like a 6 in this set just because, or at least I anticipate there being a lot of expensive cards. And, you know, whenever you can put an expensive thing on the top or bottom, it matters. And it's really going to set back like a lot of mobilized decks. Um, so I anticipate it being a little better in this set, but, you know, all context.
Are you saying it's good against mobilized because you can get their mobilized creature?
I think so, yeah. Because then their mobilized creature will
Okay.
enter. Most of the mobilized creatures don't have haste. And so,
Hmm.
you know, they'll attack. You can get the mobilized creature. You deal with the tokens for a turn, but then they have to replay it and wait another turn before they attack. It seems like that
It's
will slow
true.
them
I don't.
down significantly.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree just because I think most of the mobilized creatures are cheap and sort of the bodies they make are sort of part of their stats to some extent. I don't see that as much different from targeting like a normal cheap creature, but I see what you're saying. Like it can sort of time walk them to some extent.
Yeah, and it also gives you
This
time to
removal
like
spell
put
is
a
good at time
blocker out
walking
so they
them.
can't attack with them as well. Or like I feel like it can save you a fair amount of damage. Because I think the mobilized cards we've seen so far are have been able to be a little push on the amount of damage they can do in the early turns because the tokens get sacrificed. Um And so, you know, getting rid of the creature like can I think can save you a fair bit of damage. At least in instincts.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't
Next, we
remember
have
whose turn it
Ice
is.
Ridge. It's all good. I'm happy to just default to whoever kind of remembers it first.
All right,
So
you got it.
Ice Ridge Serpent, 4 in a blue for a Mana War. 3/3. Whenever this creature enters, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. I like it. Uh, these effects can also kind of vary a little bit in how good they are in Modern Limited. We saw a really pushed one at Uncommon in Aether Drift that was a 4/4 that also did something with speed. This is definitely worse than that, but that card was incredible. This card seems merely good to me. I'd probably say it's like an average common, somewhere around like a 7 is where
Yeah,
I'm landing.
I agree. That's about where I'm at. They improve a little bit. Just some things, when you're starting a set and you want to talk about how you evaluate cards, like where we kind of come to our numbers. If there are sets that have a lot of tokens, now mobilize does not count for this because they sacrifice. But like, you know, things that come to mind, there's like Hopeful Vigil and Wilds of Eldraine that makes a 2 mana 2/2 that saw a lot of play. This one has the 4 mana make 2/2/2s. Like if there are a lot of mechanics that make tokens in a set, these are always a little bit better because you're getting rid of the token entirely. They can't go back to the hand. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of this in this set. Um,
There is a Teamer card that makes 5/5 elephants, which
ooh,
this is incredible against.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that most of the token stuff going on is mobilized, which this doesn't work against. So, if anything, I mean, we've seen a couple of those nights, but like, I think this will probably be a token light set if you don't count mobilize. I guess there's the spirits from Endure. So maybe not. Maybe there will be a good amount of tokens to get.
yeah, I think I
I don't
like a
know.
7. It's just an interesting thing for you to
Yeah.
think about. Like when you're thinking about a new set, it's kind of when these cards vary from being like a 6 to a 7 to an 8. They're never premier, but sometimes they're a little bit better than others.
Yep.
All right, this card is called Focus the Mind, something I could listen to a little bit more often. 4 and a blue for an instant. It costs 2 less to cast if you've cast another spell this turn. Draw 3 cards, then discard 1.
Pretty strong.
This is my
I
kind of
mean,
card.
yeah, that's much better than a divination, especially in a set with some graveyard synergies. And for 5 mana at instant speed, you're not super sad if you have to cast this. If you can pass, let's say, leave up your Riverwalk dance or whatever it's called, and if they don't do anything that you want to counter or you want to remove, you can cast this instead. That's pretty nice. Um, and yeah, you'll probably be able to fit it in for 3 mana, trigger your flurry stuff at some point, and it fuels the rest of your flurry too. So this is probably one of the stronger cards for the flurry deck, and I would say I'm playing it in like most other decks as well.
Yeah,
Every deck can cast a 2 drop and then play this on turn 5. It's not that hard.
I agree. I think I've got it around a 4, would be my guess.
I like it. Yeah, I think depending on like how slow and how much you value card advantage the format is, I could see it being anywhere from like a 4 to a 7, and so I'm leaning closer to 4, but I'd probably put it at like a 5 just to be a little conservative with it. I think there's a lot to do with your mana unlimited, so I don't think you need to like prioritize this that highly ever, but it's a very strong card. So I
Yeah,
think
from what
I'm
it
on a 5, but I think 4 is reasonable.
From what it looks like so far, the blue cards at common at base don't seem like they're like really what you want to be building your deck around. So we talked about support colors, base colors. It does seem like blue might be a support color. This is a very strong support card. Like if are playing like 1 blue mana and you get to like occasionally do this to refill your hand, I think that's pretty strong. Gives it a
Yep.
little bit more flexibility, I guess.
Yeah. This is our Omen Dragon for blue. So the dragon half is 6 mana for a 4/4 flying ward 2, 5 and a blue. Um, so that's like a reasonably strong card when you get to 6 mana and can cast it. The ward is really nice to prevent you from getting blown out. And then the Omen is 1 and a blue for an instant, tap up to 1 target creature, draw a card. That's also somewhat nice. Like it'll prevent an attacker for a turn and cycle or cantrip. And it obviously helps you double spell. That's kind of part of what's going on there as well. Get a little bit of tempo while you're doing it. I like both halves of this card. I think neither of them are that special. They're not really quite on rate, but when you have the option between the two of them, it sort of becomes like totally fair rate, I think.
Yeah.
And you'll have cards that care about having dragons. So this is like exactly an average common for me. I'd give it like a 7.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. One of the interesting things that I'm thinking about now that we've read more of these cards is there's a lot of, the colors in Jeskai both reference 2 spells per turn, the red white ones being obviously a little bit more aggressive. We haven't seen too many of the ones that are like in blue red, but I think what's interesting is a lot of the blue cards that draw a card or whatever are at instant speed when we're looking at them in blue. And so it'll be interesting to see how often Like this two spell mechanic might be a lot stronger than it initially reads if, there's many cards where it's good if you cast two spells on your opponent's turn, because it definitely seems like it's possible to do that in this set. Not that it'll happen a whole lot, but if it can happen one turn and it really impacts your opponent, then that kind of gives you an idea of how you can balance the entire mechanic. So that's something I'm thinking
There's that
about,
white
seeing stuff like
common that
this.
tapped creatures. Like
Yeah.
that's a little bit more relevant on their turn. If we see more of those, yeah, something to note. Good call.
All right, Dragonstorm Forecaster. This is 1 blue for an 0/3. Search your library for a card named Dragonstorm Globe or Boulderborn Dragon. Reveal it. Put it in your hand and then shuffle. Is there a chance that, Ryan, you made the spreadsheet that if I go either forward or back, we can
Unfortunately,
read
no,
the
I
other
didn't see.
cards?
I didn't foresee that.
Thankfully, I do
I
have
think I
Scryfall
know what
open, so
those
I
cards
can
do.
I
Yeah,
can search
neither
them.
of them are very good. Spoiler
All
alert.
right, Dragonstorm Globe is a 3 mana artifact. Oh, it's the mana rock. It's a 3 mana or a mana rock. Each dragon you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter. So this looks like it's a dragon tribal type thing, and then Boulderborn Dragon is 5 mana for a 3/3 artifact creature with flying and vigilance whenever it attacks Surveil 1. This seems like it is a card that is there for the flavor win. It does not seem like it's particularly good. If you get a deck with a lot of dragons and you like a mana rock, maybe you'll want this, but I don't think it's something you're
So
picking
you
highly.
see, if you put all these bad cards in your deck, they can really, with their powers combined, become only mildly bad. I'm
There's
not
something
excited
else
about
like
it
this
at
that they've
all.
printed recently, I think, that I can't remember what set it was. But it ended up being better. Oh, maybe it's in Karlov. I think it's in Karlov. I just can't remember what it
Mm.
is.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I know vaguely what you're talking about, but
and
I
I
don't
remember
remember
it
what
being
it's
a
called.
little better than I anticipated it being. Oh, it got clues. It's a blue card.
Yeah,
It was better in that set than I anticipated it being, but I still don't anticipate this one to be good.
like 2 mana draw a card on a 1 mana 03 body is good. It's just that the cards you're drawing are bad, and you have to put them in your deck to play this card. That doesn't add up to a card that I think I would bet that I never put this in my deck in the entire format. But maybe I'll have one deck that is playing like two of the Manolith, the Dragonstorm globes, and base blue, and I sort of just put this in because I happen to want to play those cards too, and this card's fine if I have two of those. Um, but like I'd put the over under on me playing this card in my deck in this format at like one.
Okay, but hear me out. It's kind of fixing.
This is the classic Nicole argument. This one I actually would count as fixing. I mean,
Yeah, like it
you play
does,
it on turn one, you tutor up on turn two, and you play
and
your
you get a mana
Manolith on
rock.
turn three.
So I think, okay,
Yeah.
my answer has changed. That I think most of the time you don't want it. I don't think that's unplayable. I do think there are decks where, like, if you have the mana rock and you want to play expensive things, and your fixing is just a little shy or something, then I might be okay playing this for the to search the fixer. And then if I'm already playing it to search the fixer, then I might as well play one copy of this dragon.
This is definitely a Nicole quote. This counts as fixing card.
All right.
Okay. Next, veteran ice climber. One in a blue for a 1/3 vigilance that can't be blocked. And whenever it attacks, up to one target player mills cards equal to this creature's power. Weird card.
Coming off the
I
last set,
think
I want this to be so good. I've had so much
I
fun milling
know.
my opponents in Aether Trades.
I think Riverturn Monument is a little bit better than this card. I will put that out there. Um, this, I think, most of the time you're going to want to mill yourself. In like Sultai space and Teamer space, you want to like mill over those cards you can use from your graveyard. But how good is 2 mana 1/3 Vigilance unblockable?
I think it's probably
Fine.
better in this set than it would be on average, just because like black greens, like if you're in Sultai, that's the +1/+1 counters archetype, and then a lot of the effects that renew, like exile from your graveyard, they also add counters. And when you have a creature that can't be blocked that also gets bigger, it gets a lot scarier. I will note we are in the
Yeah.
uncommons. Just before I forget and I'm reading cards and I'm like, wow, this
True.
seems like a pushed common.
Good
I think
call.
this card is, it's gonna be super dependent on how the format plays out. I don't think every deck is gonna want it. My guess is I'm gonna be valuing it around a 6, but I could see it being lower than that. That's probably like the highest I value this card.
Yeah, I agree. I think you really want ways to pump this or to like make it really like more valuable than just what it is on its base. And so not every deck will want it for sure, but there probably will be some decks where it's like actively quite good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think six. I might give it like a seven because I think in most decks like you're probably not going to want it very much, but yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think the reason I give it a 6 is I feel like it is better than most of like the average commons we've talked about.
It's got upside for sure,
Yeah,
which I think
exactly.
can make you value a card higher in the draft. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Fresh start. This is 1 and a blue for a flash enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets -5/-0 and loses all abilities. Interesting. Have they printed a card like this
Interesting.
before?
It's like an unable to scream kind of effect, sort of.
Kind of, I guess. Unable to Scream was great. But it was 1 mana. And it turned it into an O2. So like it wasn't a particularly good blocker, but it didn't have flash. Um, I have a difficult time evaluating this card. I think that a big part of it is going to be how good I've said this a lot, but like how good the removal. When I say how good the removal is in this set, I think I'm mostly thinking about the removal that doesn't require any sort of, I forget what the word for it is. There's a word we should always use. Like they kill everything and they don't have any upside.
Conditional?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Conditional is what you're
Conditional.
talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. How much
Yeah.
conditional removal there is. If there's like a lot of non-conditional removal in the set, then, I think conditional removal like this is a little worse. But if there's not a lot of non-conditional removal and there's, cards with crazy bodies, this gets a little bit better. My guess is this is going to be somewhere around a 5 or a 6. Like not a premier removal spell you're picking highly, but something that you might want to have removal in your deck. Um that's just my guess.
I agree. Yeah, I think this is gonna be like, it kind of makes up for the downsides of not being, like, a full removal spell, with the upsides of, like, having flash, potentially being, like, a tricky combat trick, helping you double spell. There's, like, seems to be kind of a blue flash theme, like there often is, where you get to leave up your card draw spell in this. This sort of goes well with that card draw spell because it keeps pressure off of you and is the other spell for you to, like, use your card draw. Um, I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's going to be a card that you very often play and sometimes even prioritize pretty highly. So I'd say like yeah, five or six somewhere around there, 5.5. I'm good with. Next we have Ureni's Rebuff. One in a blue for a sorcery. Return target creature to its owner's hand and harmonize for 5 in a blue. So this is the modern day silent departure, I guess you could say. Uh, Interesting. I don't know how to feel about this card.
It's not getting me very excited. So I think the thing about these,
Yeah,
like, I've talked a lot about these blue value decks where you want to kind of like stabilize the first couple of turns and, you know, then you outvalue your opponent. It's like an interesting gameplay thing where in order to do that, you do need to be able to outvalue your opponent once you've stabilized. And things that just like return creatures to hand for 2 mana, like that's not really what I want to be doing. Like you're losing a card to return a creature, but they can just play it again the following turn. Like it's not really helping you stabilize or getting you ahead on cards. I think I'm probably pretty low on this card.
I think I'm a little bit higher than you are. Like, did you play original Innistrad? I forget if
I
that's
did play
when
original
you started.
Innistrad.
Okay. That Silent Departure was quite good and like I think surprisingly good for sort of how it looked. And I think there might be something similar going on here where like just the amount of mana advantage you get out of this can really matter. Even if you need to tap a creature, I still think like you might just slow your opponent down so much that you're getting more of that back. But I agree. I don't think it's ever going to be like premium. I think it might just be like more playable than you think. So I don't know. I'd maybe put this at like six, seven, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think I
I
was
think it
around
might
an
be a little
8.
better than the average common.
I do remember Silent Departure. I think Magic, is just it's a lot stronger than it used to be.
A
Um
2025 argument that could be
Yeah,
real.
and
Yeah,
Harmonize is like this is an expensive Harmonize cost. And so I don't know, it just doesn't excite me. But maybe I'll be proven wrong.
fair enough.
All right,
This one
Roiling
excites you.
Dragonstorm. This is one I'm quite interested in. It's an enchantment. It's 2 mana, which means you can talk about playing in an Esper Pixie. It's a 1 and a blue. When this enchantment enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. And then whenever a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. You know, this is gonna be a like a how often you can pick things up and put them down argument. If you've got I don't think I'm excited to play like draw 2, discard a card, unless I'm gonna be playing it several times in a game. Even like playing it twice makes it, if you can do it consistently, makes it a little bit better. Like maybe I want to have a copy in my deck. But unless I'm like playing several dragons or I have like the card that bounces things, I think this is not crazy exciting to me. It just doesn't
I
impact
don't
the
know.
board.
I'm a little bit more excited. I think like 2 mana is not that much if you don't have anything else to do on turn 2. This is a pretty nice play to just like smooth out your draw. Blue has 2 graveyard decks, so the discard is pretty nice. So you discard a Harmonize or a forget what the Sultai ability is, but one of those
Renew.
cards. A renew card. Uh, and like I'm pretty happy if I trigger this once. I think like draw 2, discard 1 is a very real effect, especially in the late game. And I don't know. I think this card might just be sweet. I'm putting it at like a mm, probably not a 4, maybe a 5, 4.5, somewhere in there. I think this might
So
be like a pretty premium
I
card.
think this is a fun adventure in how good you want your bounceable spells to be. I was already at a 5. This just was like it wasn't a 3 for me.
Got it,
So
got it.
I think
Okay.
like I generally value effects like this pretty highly. So I guess I wanted a little bit more for a card that was going to be super powerful. But I'd say about a 5 is where I am putting this card.
Cool. Next we have Kishla Trawlers. 2 and a blue for a creature, and when it enters, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. When you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a card that you're usually not going to be able to play on turn 3 and use the ability, but it will be a really nice card to play later in the game on like turn 6, maybe when you've traded off a creature, used a spell, and it basically just draws you a card, which is super sweet. Good at double spelling to some extent in the late game. Good with all the like stuff that discards cards, gets cards into your graveyard for free. Uh, this is a pretty sweet one. I'm not going to go too high because it's only really actively like a good card in the late game, but I like this card. I think it'll be a card you kind of do want to prioritize. I'm giving it like a 5 probably. How about you?
Yeah, I'm at about a 5. I could see it being a 6. The reason being that I feel like a lot of the cards we've looked at so far that have been removal, like specifically in blue, have been enchantments, rather than like
Mm.
instants or sorceries. So like if you think about Gastral Thrill, whatever from the last set, where the card removed a instant or sorcery from your opponent's hand, a lot of the times you'd cast it and your opponent just didn't have instants or sorceries. So I think that Magic has moved away from playing as many instants and sorceries in your deck. So blue definitely does have them, but there's a chance that this card ends up being a little worse than it reads initially, just because of the lack of instants or sorceries. But if you have enough instants and sorceries that you're excited to get with this, I think it's around a 5.
I would say, yeah, there is an asymmetry there where like you can control that part of it by putting more in your deck, whereas Gastel, whatever it was called, I also forget, like that, you had no control over it and you just didn't have the information and you had to play it without knowing whether it was going to get you another card or not. This, you have full control over that. And I think that matters a lot. We're
Yeah,
rating
yeah.
it
It
obviously
was
higher
just
than we'd rate that card, but
it's just more
yeah.
of an argument that there are less instances and sorceries in decks than like there have been maybe a year ago or something.
Yeah, is that true?
I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we could see
We'll
and
see.
maybe do some math, but yeah.
All right.
I think you're right though. In this set, you're correct that observation of like not a lot of the blue removal spells are instant sorceries. You might need to find them in other colors.
Yeah, and it's a 3-color set, so you might be totally fine. It's just anticipate the card being a 5, but maybe it gets knocked down a step if it's a little more difficult in this set or something. All right, we have Wing Blade Disciple. This is a 3 mana 2/2 flyer. And it's got Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, make a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Finally, something that makes Flurry exciting. I loved making
Does
one
it though?
once.
I don't know. I'm not super excited about this payoff.
Oh, I am.
Okay. How
I
many
love making
1/1
one
flyers are you
ones.
making to, like, make this a really actively good card?
I mean, I'm picturing a deck that does this double spell thing well.
Uh-huh.
We talked about like possibly being able to do them at instant speed, whatever it is. And if you're talking about like the other set of colors that fits these well is Jeskai, red, white having a couple of effects and possibly being a little bit more aggressive. If this is the card that you end up getting where you get a bunch of like little flyers, I think a lot of those other cards end up a lot better. It's not that I'm taking this at like a 3 or a 4 or anything. Like it's not Gremlin Tamer. We were taking Gremlin Tamer super high because it made like a 1/1 basically every turn. But I think this is like Gremlin Tamer light. Like if I was taking Gremlin Tamer at like a 2,
Okay.
I'm taking this card at like a 5, would be my guess.
Okay. I think I am a little bit lower on it. I think I need to get, like, maybe 3 flyers out of it before I'm, like, actively really happy, and that just feels so hard to enable,
It seems
and
like
I
they
don't
built
love
the
the
set
body.
to do that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it depends on, like, how much you trust the designers to, like, really let you kind of do that in a very enabled way. I'm a little bit lower on it, maybe, just, like, the ability to sort of do this every turn. Um, I don't know, I'm staking a little bit of a claim here. I think this card is gonna be, like, not that premium. I'm gonna give it, like, a 7. Um, yeah, you'll play it sometimes, but I'm a little skeptical, I will say.
Okay. That makes sense too with the like claim that blue is probably going to be more of a support color.
That's true, yeah. Next, we have Essence Anchor, 2 and a blue for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1, and then it has tap, create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. Activate only during your turn and only if a card left your graveyard this turn. This is a fascinating one. This is a definitely like a build around, and
Yeah.
very much in the blue, like graveyard harmonize and I keep forgetting what the Sultan mechanic is called. You're gonna have to remind me again. That space,
Renew.
that renew, so the harmonize renew space. I think it will be really good sometimes, and I think there will be a lot of decks that just don't want it. Like two and a blue upkeep surveil one. That card's almost playable. Like that's a powerful effect. I think 2 and a blue is a little bit too much to spend for it, but it's close to being good. And then if you make like 2 zombies, I'm quite happy. It's hard to do that because cards leaving your yard is not something that's like trivial to make happen, but it doesn't cost any mana, so like you're just getting it whenever that happens. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this as like a build around. I think a lot of decks won't play it, but I think some decks will actually really like it. So I'd give this like a 5 probably.
Yeah, that's about where I'm
What are
at.
your
I think
thoughts?
they're not remotely close to the same card, but it gives me like Essence Reliquary vibes, where like I think most
Yeah.
people will not value this card particularly highly, and so it's going to give you the opportunity to get it. And if you get it, you're going to be able to build like probably pretty cool, really strong build arounds around it. 5 sounds about right to me. Like you don't have to take it highly, but it might get past kind of late and be stronger than people anticipate it being.
In pack 3 you might take this as a 2.
Yeah. All right. We have Aegis Sculptor, 3 and a blue for a 2/3 flying Ward 2 creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Um, this card's interesting. I don't think
Yeah.
it's going to be anything too impressive. From what we've read so far, it feels like this set's going to be pretty synergistic. Um, and this doesn't necessarily, like, aside from having cards in your graveyard, feel like it's a particularly strong synergy piece. Like maybe it's better if the deck is Sultai and has a lot of like black green counters or anything, but it's like pretty fine at base. My guess is like somewhere around a 6 maybe a little lower than that.
Yeah, it's not a great blocker the turn you play it, but it becomes a pretty good one at, after a turn cycle. That's not great. Like you do want your 4 drops to be able to block pretty effectively. It's fine. It's not horrible at it, but not great. But I do think, like the card we just saw, there are going to be some synergies for removing cards from your yard, and this does that in a way that like is also a somewhat compelling card if you just have a bunch of cards in your graveyard over a longish game. It is kind of anti-synergy though too, because you are gonna have to remove your like black spells at some point. Um, yeah, it's a weird one. I think 6 is right where I would land too. I think like yeah, it's gonna be okay in some decks, and it's gonna be like not very good in a lot of decks.
Yeah, I picture there being like a really cool build around where you're playing like Kishla Skimmer with this Essence Anchor card that we just looked at. And then like this, like the value of this card goes up if you have Essence Anchor or Kishla Skimmer or something like that. It doesn't do a whole lot of base, but I think it's an interesting card. You're gonna know when you want it, I think.
Notably, there's a lot you need to enable those. Like you need those, and you also need cards that get stuff in your yard. So like it really has to be your whole deck is kind of going in this direction, which is why we're saying it's like a build around.
I agree.
Next, we've got Constrictor Sage, 4 and a blue for 4/4. When it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And then it has Renew, 2 and a blue, exile this card from your graveyard, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it, activate only as a sorcery. This is great. Like 4 and a blue, 5 mana for a 4/4 is just below the vanilla test, but being able to tap something and stun it, I think brings it like right back up to being totally on rate, maybe even actively good for a 5 drop. And the renewability is super sweet too. Like if this ever dies, you just get kind of a free effect from your graveyard that energizes with stuff like we were just talking about. This card's great. I'm really excited about it.
I agree. Yeah, this card's cool. I think I'm putting it like about a 4 would be my guess. Like if you're already in a blue deck that's going kind of slow, maybe I'm valuing it a little higher. But it seems like a pretty sweet card. Happy to draft it.
I agree. 4 is exactly where I put it.
All right, we have Bewildering Blizzard. This is 6 mana for an instant. It does a 2 blue in the mana cost. Draw 3 cards. Creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until end of turn. This card's super interesting. Initially, I was gonna be like 6 mana. Why are we playing 6 mana draw cards? But the -3/-0, it's like kind of like 6 mana draw 3 fog almost.
Right. It's like draw 4 and one of them is a 0 mana fog.
Yeah. Um, so I think I'm gonna be, decently happy to play one of these in a blue deck. I don't think you're ever gonna want any more than one. 6 mana is pretty expensive, but as a way to refill for like your double spell things to finish the games off, or you know, get some value, and you can possibly get some good blocks against an aggro deck. I think this card's cool. I'm probably putting it at about a 5. Would be my guess.
I agree with everything you said about the card up until the 5 because I think this card is exactly as good as you described, but because you only ever want to play one, you never have to pick it that highly, even though it's an uncommon. So I'd put it at like a 7 maybe, but I think it's like as good as a 5 if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think 6 is probably where I'm actually going to value taking it if I'm already in blue. And I'm just not taking it very highly, like early in drafts. So yeah,
It
I
is
think
true that it's an uncommon, so like when you see it, you won't know if you'll see another one. So maybe if your deck really wants that kind of effect, then you might just need to take it there. So
yeah.
yeah, I think 6 is like also pretty
All
reasonable.
right. We are going into our last blue card.
Yes. This is Spectral Denial. X and a blue for an instant. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and it is a syncopate style effect. So it counters target spell unless its controller pays X. These cards I think are usually pretty good and limited. It's been a long time since we've seen one from what I can remember, but the flexibility is really nice. There will often be turns where your opponent just spends all their mana to tap out for a spell, and this ends up being just a 2 mana counter spell on those turns, sometimes even a 1 mana counter spell if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, which I don't think will be very common, but will come up sometimes. And then like later in the game, if this is the last spell in your hand and you just need to like pass the turn and counter whatever they play, this sort of also does that because you can tap out and just make them pay 6 mana and they can't pay 6 mana after they've cast a spell. So
Yeah.
I think this like it gets the job done, to quote a Chapel Roan song.
Yeah, especially with like a double spell mechanic in the set. Double spell mechanics mean that you're frequently going to be tapping a lot for, or tapping out for the second spell, and the second spell, at least in like the blue red archetype, is the one that does the thing typically, I think. um and so I think this card will be pretty good. I'm anticipating it being like a 3 or a 4 would be my guess, depending on how good counter spells end up being.
I might put it a little lower. I give it like a 5. Like I think it's going to be one of the blue commons you want more than the other ones, but I don't think it's going to be something you're taking over an uncommon almost like ever. But yeah, somewhere in there.
All right. All right. And thank you for tuning into this chapter of the Tarkir Limited set review. We're having a good time chunking along. The best way you can support the channel and all of these fun things we're doing is liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video, sharing it, all things that, help the algorithm. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. I'm going to let Ryan to advertise themselves a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and plug Ryan's Patreon. I mentioned this in the last video, but I'll mention it again. I think Ryan's Patreon is like one of the best things possible when it comes to learning process, and, utilizing your time as effectively as possible to get better at Magic, and, as impactfully as possible. And so, I would go hop over and subscribe to that. If you want to support me more directly, you can also do that on my Patreon. I post, deck guides, reviews, lots of little blog style posts about how I'm planning on getting better. And is there anywhere else they can find you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. I actually forget my handle on there. It's something to do with Ryan and Condon. So if you search those, I'm sure you'll find me.
I'll put it in the description
But
too.
yeah, yeah. Patreon is obviously a good place to reach me. I um, have a lot of long backlog of free articles if people want to check those out. They're pretty high level like magic theory articles, and so I think a lot of them will still be applicable even a long time after I wrote them if people want to go read some of those. Yeah, I do these set reviews with some partner most sets nowadays, and yeah, this has been really fun.
We'll see if it garners enough attention, then maybe we'll just have to do it every set.
Yeah, it'll have to be every set.
All right, we'll see you guys for the next one.